Secrets of Beautiful Gardens is headed to the countryside.
I love this because it's practical and it's pretty.
Inspired by everything from the clipped hedges of formal European gardens, the work is brilliant. It's an absolute masterpiece. To the rustic charm of the Aussie bush.
Rarely am I lost for words, but this space here is work of a genius.
These country gardens prove that when you have the luxury of gardening on an epic scale, I've never seen anything quite like this, and I just love it. The only limit to what can be achieved is the imagination.
Now that is a dream worth having. G'day and welcome to Secrets of Beautiful Gardens. Now in this episode, Graham and I are going to travel right across rural Australia and show you the very best of country charm.
You know, the Australian bush is incredibly diverse with lots of different sorts of landscapes and climates. And when they come together with man-made gardens, believe you me, the results can be quite breathtaking.
We've got orchards and vineyards and even a rainforest in the most unusual positions to show you. So sit back and relax. We guarantee you'll be inspired, so you'll be out in the garden this weekend.
First up is a real treat, one of the most respected country gardens in the nation. Walking around this stunning garden, you could be confused for thinking you're in the European countryside somewhere. Fabulous exotic trees, flower meadows and farming country beyond. But no, this place is actually in the Adelaide Hills and it's called ALU Country Farm. And believe you me, this is country gardening at its very best. As you walk around, the first thing that captures your attention are certainly the flowers. They're the real heroes or heroines of the garden. No matter what the season, this garden has something in flower. That's the skill of the gardener and the plant selection. As these poppies finish and go to seed, the liliums over here take over, jostling for sunshine and your attention saying, look at me, look at me. The garden is actually very informal. It's not perfect. It's what I call relaxed by design, capturing your eyes as you're walking through. It's easy to see why gardeners are the least stressed people in the world. These beautiful columbines or granny's bonnets are really easy to buy and grow. You just get the seed, throw it in, or you can buy little seedlings. But there are others a little bit hard to track down. This is phlomis or Jerusalem sage. That comes from that part of the Mediterranean, from Turkey, Israel, right around to Greece. So it loves it hot and dry. Interestingly, it's flowering beautifully under the shade of this tree here. So it just shows how tough this little plant is. It's been in Australia for a long, long time, maybe a couple of 100 years. So it's worth having a look for. There are so many beautiful flowers here. It's hard to pick a favourite like these hollyhocks, but you know, you can't go past the princess lilies. These are the alstroemeria, and they are so easy to grow. This one is called Sun King. It's quite tall. It can actually get up to about waist high. Now, there are lots of different varieties right the way through the garden. Some are sitting low on the ground, others quite tall. All the different range of really intense colours right through to soft pastels. They're easy to grow because they come from a little bulblet. They'll survive just about anything in your garden. Another clever key design element of ALU Garden is the meandering pathways. Actually, there's over 100 of them going off in different directions. And there's not one of them that's straight. They're all got these wonderful curves mimicking the informality of the garden designs. They're not only interesting, but they're inviting, encouraging you on to discover something new. You You know, nothing says country garden more than formal beds of roses. And here they're truly superb. Great big heads of colour. Some are English and of course some are French. There's an interesting sort of style they've got here, which I rather like, and that's each garden bed in each corner is one single colour. It increases the impact and it really looks spectacular. The ground cover is catmint, the Nepeta, and it's a great little ground cover for roses. But without a doubt, it's the entrance archway that really is the top of the tree. It's just beautiful, covered with New Dawn and Pierre de Ronsard rose. Perfume and perfection. Many of the plants we've seen here today you can get at your local nursery, and none more popular than the spectacular bougainvillea. Aren't they incredible? Just really eye-popping colour, and they're scattered right throughout the garden, all the different colours and varieties. Now there's a couple planted on the face of the old cottage over there, one either end of a piece of rail running across the front of the building. Eventually the two plants will join up, and then the plant itself will become a striking architectural feature in the garden. ALU is truly a spectacular country garden. And as for those rose arbours, aren't they just beautiful? I just love them. Now, if you want to grow really good roses, my best tip for you is definitely fertiliser and sunshine. But you know, that's only just the beginning. With 500 years of rose breeding history, deciding between David Austin's English roses or hybrid teas will be just one of your many challenges. But if you love roses, hang around because we've got heaps more varieties coming up for you.
Later, a magnificent formal garden with a fabulous sense of fun.
A herd of elephants in the front garden.
Plus an inspirational garden that's full of surprises. Like they've picked up a bit of the Daintree and dropped it here in Ballarat. But after the break, a cottage garden that is as practical as it is beautiful. It's like eating lollies. G'day and welcome back. Now, I'm unashamedly a city slicker, born and bred in the suburbs. But every night when I go to bed and my head hits the pillow, I dream about moving to the country. Just look at the contrast. In the city, our blocks of land are getting smaller. Real estate prices are through the roof. Or you can move to the country, get a bigger block of land for a lot less money, and traffic, what's that? Well, this next story is all about that contrast. A lady who was a corporate lawyer for over 20 years turned her back on the city to live her dream in the country. And what a dream it is. She's built her perfect garden, and I fell in love with it the minute I saw it. Melrose is a gorgeous little historic property just down the road from Daylesford in Victoria. Once a derelict bluestone cottage with a neglected garden, the owner, a designer herself, took on the huge challenge to bring them back to life and then some. The garden at the front of the property pays homage to the little cottage, so you've got a cottage garden. The roses were all here. They hadn't been pruned for generations and neglected, but they've been cut back and they are thriving. I really like this. It's an elephant garlic or Russian garlic. It's a good-looking plant. You get a nice flower out of it. And garlic, fresh garlic, is about $65 a kilo, so you're going to get a free feed as well. An old-school lavender hugging the path. And the front hedge, well, I wouldn't recommend you plant it at home. It's privet. If you've got an existing one, you're allowed to keep it if you hedge it and don't let it flower. Because if it goes to flower, it'll go to seed, and then it's a weed. It's a bit hard to say what kind of garden this is. I know it's a gardener's garden because there is so much planting. But then you come into this space and you have the world's most formal pool. But how good does it look as a contrast with the plants coming right up to the edge? Lavender and jasmine spilling into it, so you can go for a swim and have a nice smell at the same time. And as for pool fences, well, if they're all here, it's perfectly safe, but they're all hidden by plants. This cute little hut adds lots of character. Inspired by hay sheds of central Victoria, it's built of telegraph poles, corrugated iron and recycled railway sleepers. With a Middle Eastern feel, it's all about relaxing. And this is the working garden where the produce is brought in for the kitchen. In fact, that building there was attached to the old house and it was the kitchen. They pulled it apart and put it back together here as a garden house. I love this because it's practical and it's pretty. The roses really soften the edges. The espalier apples, they're still productive, but they don't take up much space. The old railway sleepers, they're so safe to work with because they haven't been dipped in anything. I like the fact that even the most practical things like the stakes are a work of art. These have been handcrafted locally. And as far as produce goes, I think it's pretty productive. And what do they say? Fresh is best. It's like eating lollies. Everywhere you look in this garden, there's something planted and it looks effortless, but it's actually been thought out. Like along this veranda here, you've got valerian and rosemary, two herbs that smell lovely, especially when you brush up to it. So it's got a calming influence on you when you sit back and enjoy the garden. But the best thing about this garden, the thing that strikes me the most, is it's gone from 0 to hero in 8 years. And it just goes to show, if you love something and you're passionate about it, you can achieve great things. Now that is my kind of garden. I would swap any day if they wanted to. The thing I liked most was the use of recycled materials and the old railway sleepers. Made it look like it had been there forever. So later in the show, I'm going to take some inspiration from that by using some second-hand timbers and convert a drab little courtyard in the inner city into something that will have a touch of the country charm about it.
Coming up next, a vineyard that's truly a hidden gem. Some of the finest topiary I've ever seen on a winery estate. Who would have thought it? Welcome back. You know, the Southern Highlands of New South Wales are very well known for their rolling green hills and picture-perfect landscapes, especially during the cooler months. And in recent decades, they've also become home to some very popular boutique vineyards, just like Fifth Chapter Winery. Fifth Chapter's garden designer, Peter Hastings, has created quite a formal garden by using popular plants in ways you may not expect. So if you're a keen gardener, keep your eyes peeled for some familiar plants used in some unfamiliar ways. John, found you.
G'day, Graham.
How are things?
Yeah, good. Great, man.
Wow, what an incredible joint this is. Yeah. It's like a grand manor in the middle of the Aussie bush, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see, the boutique Fifth Chapter Winery doesn't just produce some very fine Pinot, Sauvignon Blanc and Shiraz. It also has some of the loveliest formal gardens in the country. How big's the property?
The property's 100 acres.
And the garden?
The garden's around 7, probably more like 10 now because it seems to get bigger every year.
Very good head gardener. Look at the quality of those roses and the foliage.
That is a good spot here.
Love to have a look in the rest of the garden.
Be my guest.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. In front of the house and beyond the rose garden is an amazing alley or avenue which leads you on to a beautiful vista out into the landscape. It's lined with this really tight hedge of buxus, but when you get to the first set of stairs, it changes. This is a dwarf pittosporum called Green Pillar. And then you've got these exploding columns of Italian cypress, beautifully tightly clipped. On either side, it's lined with Japanese cherries. They're in their full autumn glory. And as the pathway comes down to the culmination, the hedge actually splits into two beautiful circles, featuring this elegant Victorian fountain. As you come through the precision Leighton green cypress hedge, it opens out into a glorious French parterre garden. If anything, the hedges are a little bit higher than they are in France, but I think here they are even more precisely pruned. In fact, all of the maintenance is really impeccable. The conifers and certainly the Buxus cones, the topiaries, are stunning quality. Around the outside are a beautiful collection of standard white iceberg roses. In the centre is a very interesting variegated cordyline, but what really sets it off is that the urn is planted with dichondra silver falls, which just spills out, creating a really dramatic centrepiece for the whole garden. The work is brilliant. It's an absolute masterpiece. Surrounding the entire garden is an incredible hedge, over 1 metre wide and a couple of metres tall. It's Camellia sasanqua, two old varieties. The white one is Minor Yuki and the double pink is Jennifer Susan. They've got similar growth habits, which is a really good tip when you're selecting plants for a hedge. Formal hedging has been used throughout all of 5th Chapter's garden zones, including one that comes as quite the surprise package. Yes, it's a Japanese garden, complete with a little red bridge. Of course, white gravel is essential, but instead of having clipped azaleas, they've gone for clipped buxus. Interestingly, these little fellows here are not clipped. This is their natural shape, the Alberta cypress from Canada. But to keep it really Japanese, the maples, and look at the colour. They're just loving the cooler nights and the clear blue skies. And a water feature. The water pouring down from the mountains like a giant river and then coming into calmer waters down by the seaside. Very traditional, and it really works. But just to show that the owners and the head gardener have got an Aussie sense of humour, they've clipped some of the cypress into a Buddha and a couple of funny rabbits. I love it. A truly wonderful garden, a hidden gem, absolutely stunning. I really have to tip my lid to 5th Chapter's original designer, Peter Hastings. He's done a brilliant job in combining the fun and formality into one garden. And whilst he's really enjoying well-earned retirement, head gardener John is continuing the very same vision. What really blends the English, the French and the Japanese styles together so expertly is the way Peter and John have used clipped hedges throughout, even in the quirky elements like the Buddha and the rabbits. Those incredible camellias surround the whole ensemble, while the cypress hedge welcomes you into that stunning parterre. Then they've used buxus hedging in the Japanese garden. So even though you're working with 3 different garden styles, there really is a common link, and it's created that sort of cohesive flow throughout the whole garden. It's a great credit to Peter originally and to John's continuing work.
Coming up next, we'll show you how to bring some country inspiration into your own backyard. The garden is definitely the jewels in the crown. Welcome back to Secrets of Beautiful Gardens. Now, earlier in the episode, we visited Melrose, a garden in rural Victoria. Now, it looked like it had been there for generations, but the truth was it was only 8 years old. Clever design, introducing recycled materials and old timbers made it look like it had been there forever. Well, I'm going to take inspiration from that and try and apply it into a backyard in the city, turning something that's a little bit drab into something that's got a touch of that country charm. Come on, mate. I'm looking for inspiration. Now, when you're working with recycled products, it's good to have an open mind, because I don't know what I want until I see it. All this timber here is from the wharfs. It would have been piers sitting in and out of the water. Now, the hearts have gone in them, so it's no good as structural beams. That brings the price down. And at 60 bucks a linear metre, something like this will be perfect for what I'm thinking. Job done. And here's our little space. Now, what I like about it most, it's like a little courtyard within a whole big backyard. I've got 3 walls, the back of the house, the fence, and then these posts, I can do something with that. So this will be quite intimate. At the moment, it's tired and neglected, but when we're finished, we're gonna have a new dance floor, some nice gardens, and some recycled timber. That's gonna make a beautiful feature bench that you're gonna see when you come out of the back of the house. So, let's get the concrete paths up. So that your pavers stay level long term, make sure you compact your road base. The easiest way is to start on the outside and work your way in. Then it's down to the sand for the screening. It shouldn't be too wet and it shouldn't be too dry. That way it'll hold its shape until the pavers go down. We're laying what I like to call landscape royalty, sawn Sydney sandstone. Now these guys are 800 long and 400 wide, but when it's down, it looks like something you'd see out of the grandest country manor. And these mortise joints that I've left, or shadow lines, are quite large, just to hide a millimetre or 2 fault that I might have around the place. But when the job's finished, and you stand back, oh, I used the wrong size of the mallet and I've scuffed it. Oh, well, it was looking good. Oh! Now for the screen, I've got something that's really cheap. I'm going to put up some cypress pine because these are all the leftover pickets from fences that I've done over the years. Now they're all the same thickness, but if you did it at home and you could get your hand on random timber, it'd look just as good. Now I've just got a little bit of the off-cut of the cypress, which I'm using as a spacer, which means I don't have to pick the level up every time I put a board on. It's still important to check from time to time. I might do it every 3 or 4 runs. And to soften the fence, I'm using a living screen of pittosporums, which is one of the beautiful varieties of hedging that we saw when Graham showed us around the Fifth Chapel Winery earlier in the show. I'm going for a garden bed because there's a level change between our new paving and the existing lawn. Now, everything here is pretty much just going to form a mound. There's nothing that's going to get too high. The little euphorbia will be the biggest one, beautiful foliage and a lovely contrast. They might get to about 1 metre tall. But this is the one that's caught my eye. It's a little Hebe. It's called emerald green. Only gets to 40 centimetres high and it'll keep its form, so it'll look a little bit like a big beach ball and adds to that country charm feel. Finally, it's time for the star of the show, my piece of recycled timber straight off a Sydney wharf. What a beautiful piece of timber we've got, and the chances of moving it like this are none and buckleys. But what I'm going to do is cut 2 legs, which will be 500 mil long, so there's my metre there, and then my bench is going to be 2.2. I'm going to sit the big bench on top of these guys, kind of just like that. You've probably seen it down a local park or reserve. And I won't even have to screw them together because the weight, I'll keep it in position. I don't want it to lose its charm, but I do want it to be comfortable. How good's this little space look? By using some pre-loved materials and simple plantings, I've been able to bring a bit of country charm to what was once just a barren patch of a city backyard. Recycling always gives a garden a bit of depth straight away. It makes it look like it's been here longer. This place is so neat and tidy, the only thing that doesn't fit is me.
I tell you what, you may not have fitted, but those recycled products certainly did. And that enormous log, that was brilliant.
It was a really nice space. That was a small backyard, but we still broke it up into areas. You had your dining area, and then the big log was doubling as a lounge, so you could entertain out there. And then you still got the garden where the kids can do their business, the dog can do its business, and you can be a gardener.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to call them garden rooms. Remember that? That was back in the 80s. But coming up, we've got a place that's got absolutely the best garden rooms or garden zones I've ever seen. It really is brilliant. And in fact, you'll enjoy the way that they've created them using different materials. And the great thing is, it's surrounded by the Aussie bush. Located just 90 minutes from Melbourne in Victoria's Spa Country, you'll come across the secluded treasure that is the Garden of St Earth. St Earth isn't just one garden. It's actually many distinct garden areas that work really well when all put together. And what a place! A lovely stone cottage built way back in 1863. Now it's surrounded by a beautiful perennial garden. They've not had really good rain for over 4, maybe 5 months. And just look at these plants. Russian sage, the perovskia. Agastache, isn't it beautiful? Columns of colour up the back. Beautiful bergamot, salvia in full bloom. Achilles, wonderful dahlias, all loving these dry conditions. A short walk away on these beautiful graded gravel pathways leads you into the bush garden, which takes you right to the edge of the Wombat State Forest, passing some beautiful blackwood wattles, which gave its name to the original gold mining township that used to be here. And then suddenly you encounter some imported exotics. A giant Monterey pine, yes, indicating there are some exotic trees planted a long, long time ago here.
The height of the gold rush in the 19th century, there were up to 14,000 people living here.
Wow! Julian Blackhurst is the head gardener, and it's in the vegetable patch you'll find a great collection of old heirloom varieties. And what about the carrots?
The carrots are an old variety that we call heirloom mix, so it's a combination of your purple, your yellow and your orange carrots.
Of course, the originals were purple.
That's right, yeah.
I notice you've also got Tuscan kale. It's 2,000 years old, isn't it? The Romans were eating that.
That's right, and it tastes as good now as it did back then.
Growing plants, as you do here, you must pick up a lot of tips. Any that you'd like to pass on? I notice your asparagus there. I can see tying those up is a great idea. Any other tips for gardening that you've picked up over the years?
Use as much compost as you can. And try not to leave too much bare soil. Nature doesn't like bare patches.
And the sun just bakes it and cooks it to death, doesn't it?
That's right, and that's where your weeds will come up.
And that's where your weeds will come up, and we don't want those. If you're short of space but still want to grow veggies, have a look at this for an idea. Beautiful sweet corn with cobs all over the place. Underneath it, it's been planted with cucumbers, and they're growing really well. And then, growing up the sweet corn, a beautiful crop of rattlesnake beans. Now that's economy growing. The food forest is a very interesting concept. It's based on permaculture techniques. So you've got a huge combination of different types of foods, from the berries over the arbours. Down on the ground we've got, well, rhubarb there and herbs like sage. The technique is to ultimately cover the whole garden with the fruiting trees, walnuts, olives, even hazelnuts. They'll be the overhead canopy, and all of this will exist underneath. It's a very dynamic garden. If you thought the kitchen garden or the food forest were impressive, have a look at this. It's the espaliered orchard, and there are over 30 different types of fruits here. Apples, pears, lots of different types of pears, all espaliered in this amazing sort of fan-like arrangement. This is the original 1930s orchard, and you can see the old fruit trees at the back there. You know, they're getting as much fruit off these espaliers as they did off the old fruit trees. I've only been here for a day, but it feels like I've been visiting 10 different gardens, not just one. I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what type or size garden you're growing, you'll definitely get some inspiration here at St Earth. Isn't that a truly beautiful garden? I just love the atmosphere. Now, if you've got space at your place to create different zones, I think the trick to keeping the garden as a whole harmonious is really making sure that each of those garden zones is specifically themed. If you want a veggie garden, a cottage garden and a tropical garden all in one backyard, define your zones really clearly and don't bleed those areas into other parts of the garden. Keep the interlinking spaces generic and let the rooms do the talking. After the break, Jason and I will be back with more beautiful gardens that capture the charm of the Australian countryside.
Next, a remarkable garden in the middle of nowhere, and I was speechless. Very rarely am I lost for words, but this space here is work of a genius. Welcome back to Secrets of Beautiful Gardens. Now, have you ever tried to manipulate the environment of a plant? And by that I mean grow a tropical plant in a cool climate, or vice versa, a cool climate plant in the tropics in full sun. It's hard work and you end up wasting your money. Well, this next garden has manipulated its environment. In fact, it's created its own environment and the garden's thriving. And the location, it's pretty unusual too. When I think of the landscape in the country, I think of natural beauty. Well, something that's not meant to be beautiful, like a wool shed, but because time's passed, it is. But what happens when you get a garden designer from the city, add those elements of the country together, you create something that is perfect and unique, and so quintessential Australian. This stunning and surprising dry garden is the work of award-winning Melbourne designer, Richard Bellamo. Given the climate the designers had to deal with, what an achievement. Over 40 degrees in summer, freezing in winter. So good plant selection was the key to this innovative garden success. So the garden's split up into zones. This first one here is the dry garden, but it doesn't look dry because it's so full. These stones here, well, they're called honey granite. They've travelled about an hour and a half down the road and been plonked into site. They had a massive B double of stone. Now this is a little acacia, a wattle. Now you normally expect them to be a great big tree, but this one is a ground cover, and as you can see, there's no chance of weeds growing through it because it's about 40 or 50 centimetres thick. Grass tree there, great investment in the future because they're expensive to buy and hard to transplant. And then this Castlemaine granite, which is kind of planted like the skeleton of a dinosaur or something, is pretty eye-catching. And I like these green cushions. They look lush and green like they'd need a ton of water, but I know they're not getting it because they're planted next to these cousin-its, which are ridiculously drought-tolerant. This garden's full of surprises, like the old miner's shed. And dotted around the garden, you'll also find some beautiful original sculptures. This one's made out of those huge nails that you see going through sleepers on a railway line. And the other one is the plough discs that would have worked the land here, that have been welded together to make that beautiful ball. And this is where the old starts to meet the new in Australian garden design. You can see that they've got their old rustic boiler there. Now that would have kept the steam up, either to work for gold or work the farm. And because that rust colour's so dominant, you can see it in this stone. And this structure's made out of wistow, which has beautiful dark colours, but all these oranges and reds look like the rust of the boiler. And that ties in perfectly with these leucadendrons, because the top of them have the same red. And the star in this little garden is the euphorbias. They're playful, they look happy, and there's so many of them that, again, you don't have a chance of grabbing a weed. But the biggest surprise of all is in the shed. Very rarely am I lost for words, but this space here is work of a genius. And to think what it's got to work with. 40-something degrees heat on the high side and sub-zero on the low side, and yet you've got a beautiful fernry. It's kind of like a glass house. What the frame is just mimicking the old storage shed that used to be here. So from the street, it doesn't look like much, but inside, the temperature's dropped about 10 degrees. It's a lot shadier because the battens are nice and close together. And you've got beautiful ferns and ground covers, like they've picked up a bit of the Daintree and dropped it here in Ballarat. and the water feature looks as natural as any little creek you'd see running through a rainforest. The big timber posts, well, they're actually piers out of Sydney Harbour that they sourced and found, moved here, and they look like they're the trunks of beautiful big gum trees growing up into the forest. The staghorns and the elks grow on them, and it looks as natural as you'd see.
And a clever inbuilt misting system keeps the moisture up, creating a unique tropical microclimate in the most unlikely place.
The thing you notice in here the most is that you can just grow whatever you like, wherever you live, as long as you manipulate the environment. Now, I'm not really a fan of trying to manipulate the environment. I like to put something in a spot where it's going to thrive, because to me, gardening should be a reward. But when you see it done like this, I can understand the attraction. I mean, from the outside, the wool shed sits perfectly in the rural environment. And Richard Bellamo, the garden designer, could have easily just bowled it over and turned that space into outdoor garden. But he was truly inspired when he decided to keep it there and work with it and create that unnatural environment inside for the rainforest. And after the break, we've got one more garden for you that's jam-packed full of great ideas and stunning features.
Coming up next, a fabulous formal garden with a wonderful sense of whimsy. I've visited formal gardens all around the world, and I've never seen anything quite like this conga line of elephants. Welcome back. Our last country charmer today is located in northern Tasmania, and it's absolutely bursting with colour and colonial history. The owners were inspired by Prince Charles's garden at Highgrove, so I guess you could say the garden is English traditional. But there's still plenty of room for fun in amongst all that formality. Tasmania is spoiled for choice when it comes to stunning natural landscapes and beautifully preserved heritage homes. And nestled amongst the lush green hills about an hour south of Devonport, you'll find a spectacular example of both, the 97-hectare property Old Wesleydale. Although the property and homestead dates back to 1829, the garden is relatively new. And it's full of surprises, not the least of which, the vast bulk of it was created in just 14 years by two people. Come on, fella. The owners of the estate, Deb and Scott Wilson, moved here in 2001 to what was pretty much a blank canvas. There were a couple of the old mature ornamental trees from the original plantings, like this American liquid amber, a beautiful weeping English wych elm. Round the back there's a row of Italian poplars. But the rest, all of it, they've created, using very traditional techniques, but also some unique design principles. But as you come into the back garden, it's a very different scene altogether, with this young coppice planting of silver birch, with their striking white trunks and black marks. It's a beautiful zone to be in. From here, the landscape looks quite different, with this beautiful circular, open, sunny spot in the middle of the garden. But notice the buxus hedging is knee-high, which means that the planting of the shrubs and the perennials can be much more relaxed and blousy and loose. But have a look at this for a hedge. Isn't it the most amazing purple you've ever seen? I've never seen any darker. It's a Hebe, a Veronica, and it's called Turkish Delight. Formal hedging, informal planting. Very clever. Having garden rooms enables you to create a really stunning feature, especially mass planting. Look at the colour, it's towering above us here. Some old favourites, look at Lychnis, tough, hardy old plant, magenta flowers and grey, soft, delicate leaves. Oh, that's an interesting plant. Chinese gooseberry, the kiwi fruit. Male and female there, so they're obviously happy getting some fruit facing out into the sunshine. Wonder what's behind here. Just like any door in a house, you open it, leads you into a completely new space, a different room altogether. All these walls are new, but they're now clothed with beautiful roses and looking stunning. But of course, the real standouts are these enormous spires of delphiniums. They're really quite outstanding. The edge of the pathway informally lined with the little catmint and the peter. But here is a Persian carpet, as you have in any room. It's a feature carpet, but it's been created with sedum in the middle, but the Celtic knot has been woven, not easily I might add, with a pair of secateurs, with buxus. The advantage of solid walls, you can actually grow climbers on them or hang plants on them. The whole objective is to create interest and a sense of discovery. There are plenty of quirky elements in the garden that add a sense of fun to the formality, like this flock of chooks in full flight heading across the lawn, or the tortured willow that's been cleverly crafted into a heron's nest up there in the tree. But without a doubt, my absolute favourite is this conga line of elephants. I've visited formal gardens all around Australia and all around the world, and I've never seen anything quite like this. It started out 10 years ago as a hedge of small-leaved honeysuckle, Lonicera nitida. It is, of course, a work in progress. It changes from year to year. There's a little baby elephant that's starting to be created just at the end of the other line. It's very, very clever, and I just love it. Just looking around, there is so much to like about this garden here at Old Wesley Dale. A traditional formal English garden in the Mersey Valley in the heart of Tasmania. And like all good gardens, there are plenty of seats to sit and look around and watch nature put on its show.
Mate, that's an amazing garden. It's hard to believe it's a husband and wife team and not a whole landscape crew.
Well, that's true. It's like heritage meets history meets country charm.
The colour in that garden just, it makes you happy.
Yeah, and in fact, colour really excites the mind, and I think it just sort of swells the soul. And that's what Deborah's done. She's brought in colour. She's broken all the rules and created some wonderful coloured little sections. I just love it. It's beautiful.
Well, it goes to show you, everything you've seen tonight, they've manipulated the environment some way and broken the rules. Whether it be a formal Japanese garden in a rural setting or a rainforest and fernery in Victoria where they get heavy frosts, they've done what they've wanted to do and they've made it work.
I hope you've enjoyed our little sojourn around Australia looking at some great country charm. Next time, we'll have even more secrets of beautiful gardens to show you. Next time, we're working smarter, not harder. Looks good, no mowing and no weeds.
As we go inside beautiful gardens that showcase the best in intelligent design.
Designing it so it works with the surrounding environment.
And intelligent design by nature itself. Mount Gambier's amazing sinkhole garden.
These imaginative gardens have really thought of everything. And I reckon this garden has ticked all the boxes.